I don't think there's anything that separates a professional chef from a home cook than stocks and sauces. Most people that cook at home don't think about making stock that much. They'll buy it in a can or in a bag or a box, or once in a while they'll make it. They'll make usually chicken stock, maybe sometimes beef stock. But in a kitchen, in a restaurant, we'll have three or four different stocks. And sometimes we'll even mix them together. And that's what gives you the layers of flavor that you're looking for in food you get in a restaurant that you don't get at home. Now, I'm going to explain all the stocks to you, and you'll make up your own mind about which ones you'd like to try. Let's start by saying, first of all, there are basically three different stocks. There's meat stock, and when I say meat, I'm talking about beef, chicken, poultry, anything that is an animal. Then there's fish stock. Now, when we say fish stock, we have shellfish and we have sea fish. We have, the fish with bones in it and fish that come in shells. Those are different tastes. And sometimes you'll mix them, especially if you're going to mix different fish together, like when you're making bouillabaisse or paella or something else, cioppino. And then there's vegetable stock, which is pretty simple to understand. It's made from vegetables, period, the end. Now, vegetables do go into the meat stock and the fish stock and the shellfish stock, but you can leave that out and just make a vegetable stock if you just want to eat vegetarian, number one. And number two, the nice thing about vegetable stocks is they're very, very mild. Sometimes you can get aggressive flavors in especially stocks made out of lamb, because lamb is more flavorful than beef, even when it's boiled to death, like what you do when you make a stock. Now, there's two different ways to make a stock, and I'm talking meat primarily. You can roast the bones, and then you make your stock with water and aromatics. Now, what that does is that roasting caramelizes the sugar in the meat, and you get a little bit more aggressiveness in your stock, and that's fine if that's what you're looking for. But if you want something a little lighter, then you don't roast the bones, and you cook them with the raw meat on there. Now, there's two things that you're looking for when you make a stock. You want flavor, and you want consistency. Now, the flavor comes from the meat. That's it. In shellfish, the flavor actually comes from the shells, even though in some cases, if you're going to grind roasted crab shells, which is not easy to do, and I'll explain that later, you have to roast them first and roast them quite liberally. The same with shrimp shells. They have to be crisp like a potato chip because that brings out the essential oils in the shell, which is where all the flavor is. So let's start with meat. Okay, you want first flavor. That's obvious, okay? Number two, you want some sort of creamy consistency. Now, you get that in certain animals and only certain parts of the animal, and that is in joints, because joints have collagen. And what collagen is, and we all have collagen in our bodies, it helps to lubricate the parts of our body that move. So any moving part, necks, legs, backs, feet. Obviously, those are the best parts to use when you're making stock because they have the most collagen and they have the most consistency when you're making stock. Now, obviously, that's not an option when you're making fish stock because they don't have collagen, and when you're making vegetable stock because they don't have collagen. So what you have to do is add some flour to it if you want consistency, or just leave it alone. You're making a broth in essence, because you're not going to really get a lot of consistency in vegetable or fish stocks. But people that eat mostly meat or meat products and fowl, you're going to get consistency. Now, what is the most prized stock? The most prized stock is veal stock. And why is that? Because young animals have more collagen in them to help those bones grow without breaking than any other animal. So veal stock is the number one stock because it gives you this luxurious, thick consistency. Plus the flavor of the veal is also spectacular, even though it's not as flavorful as beef, especially beef that has been roasted, because those bones can give you a lot more flavor to it. And like I said, in some instances, that's what you want. In other instances, it's not what you want. Now, the other side effect of this is called a broth. The difference between a broth and a stock is that broths are never cooked first. As a matter of fact, they are very, very lightly made because they are a broth. That's what they're supposed to do. They're not supposed to be the main ingredient. They're supposed to carry the other ingredients. And like I said before, a broth is made by not roasting the bones, not even caramelizing the carrots and celery and onions that go into it. It all goes in raw because now you're getting the pure essence of the flavors that are going in and not the addition of heat, which is going to change some of those flavors. Now, what else goes into a stock? Well, this is where things get a little tricky, all right? There's a lot of things you can put in a stock. I mean, the basics are what we call the Holy Trinity: carrots, celery, onion, all right? A bay leaf, some black peppercorns, that is tradition. Do you have to put it in there? No, you don't have to put it in there. I mean, the vegetables, yes, you got to put the vegetables in there because they do add, a lengthy flavor to the stock and expand the flavors. But yeah, bay leaf has a nice little smell to it. The black peppercorns add something. I don't know what it does really, to tell you the truth, but everybody does it. So it's one of those things you just do. However, there are a lot of things that people don't talk about that I use, and I love the way it works in the stock. The number one ingredient that I put in every single stock is vermouth. Now, what is vermouth? Vermouth is a slightly sweet, and I'm talking about the dry vermouth, not the sweet vermouth. And the dry vermouth is still slightly sweet, but it is infused with all kinds of botanicals, juniper berries, cardamom, cinnamon, in very small quantities, to where it's so perfectly integrated in a good vermouth, you can't really pick them apart, but they're there and you get it, okay? And instead of going out and buying all those ingredients and toasting them and grinding them and putting them into your stock, go get a good bottle of vermouth because it's the same stuff. It's all the same stuff, The only thing that I add to it sometimes is star anise and my infamous carrot juice. We had a session on the different types of appliances and toys that we use in the kitchen. A juicer is one of my favorites because it's amazing what you can do with a juicer. Go look at that one and tell me what you think if you haven't seen it already. Anyway, to get back to that, it's carrot juice because carrot juice is way sweeter than carrots. And that little touch of sweetness adds another component, another part of the flavor. When you're looking to make a great dish, and when you have a great dish in a restaurant, if you really take it apart, it has layers of flavor. There's one layer on top of the other layer on top of the other layer, and they're all integrated perfectly. One doesn't stand out unless you want it to. When I make Caesar salad, I want the anchovy and the garlic to stand out, so I put more in than most other people. But that's up to you, Maybe you'll want tarragon to stand out. Maybe you'll want something else to stand out. But the fact is, when you're talking about a balanced dish, nothing really stands out. It all stands out together. And that's one of the beautiful things of adding good vermouth. Now, when I say good vermouth, I don't mean that garbage you buy for $6 or $7 a bottle. Sorry, that stuff is disgusting. I would be worried about throwing that down the drain for what it would do to my drain. I'm talking about really good vermouth. And that is usually made in France and Italy and Spain. Believe it or not, France makes some fabulous vermouth, even though it's considered an Italian wine. And so does Spain. As a matter of fact, Spain makes some incredible vermouths, and you're going to spend 18 to 20 to even $30 a bottle, but you're going to use maybe a quarter of a cup in 5 gallons of stock. So it's going to last you a while unless you're drinking martinis. And then you'll figure out that, boy, oh boy, martinis sure taste good with good vermouth. That's another topic, and I don't know that it's even one of mine. But anyway, that's the important part. Which one should you buy? Well, I can't tell you that because I don't know what's available in your market. but any good wine store is going to have a high-end vermouth, and they're going to be really good. One of the most popular ones, and I think one of the best, is made in California by Andy Quaddy, and it's called Via, V-Y-A. And I heartily recommend that. It's probably up to about $20 now, but again, you're not using that much. And when it really makes that much of a difference in your stock, it's worth it. Now let's go through all of the little elements and ingredients in your stocks.
Here are raw neck bones. They really do make a fabulous, fabulous stock. Next up are breasts and legs. They're also very, very good. Now here is what veal bones look like when they're not cooked. They're raw at this point. And this is what they look like when they're roasted. You can see all that caramelization. That's going to give a lot of flavor. Next up is roasted shrimp shells. Those are fabulous. If there's a little meat in them, just the better. And finally, the aromatics: carrots, celery, onion. You can even put in some shallots or some parsley. It all works together. And finally, you put in water, the bones, and this is what you end up with. We call it scum. It's not a very good name, but it's actually the fat that is floating to the top from the bones releasing the fat. And you want to get rid of it because it's going to coagulate on top anyway, and it's also going to bring in some flavors that you may not want. It gives you a much cleaner tasting stock. So you'll get a sieve and you'll scoop it out. It takes about 2 or 3 minutes after it started boiling.
Okay, so there you have it. You got the ingredients, you got the methods, you have suggestions, but you can come up with your own suggestions too, you know. I mean, stocks are really resilient. They're not as easy to mess up as you might think they are. I mean, obviously, if you put something really stupid in there, like a banana, it's probably not going to help. But the fact is, there's a lot of things you can put in there that are going to give it a little bit of flavor. It's not going to dominate because don't forget, most of the stock is water, and we know about water, right? But what those stock ingredients turn water into is a spectacular, wonderful thing. And then the next thing we're going to talk about is how we make sauces out of those stocks. Most of the time, I use stocks in like soups and broths and to cook other things. And then once in a while, we'll make a sauce to go with it. It depends on what you're cooking. Sometimes I just like salt and pepper on my food, especially a really good steak, because I don't want to taste anything else but a really good steak. And same thing can go for really good chicken. But that's a personal decision. I mean, I give you some suggestions, but you can go off on your own and try different things. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did.